You tonight. Let's bring in Hen Feder, the Israeli spokesperson at the embassy here in Paris. Good to see you. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
We've heard from Iranian residents in Tehran saying day has been turned into night, the explosions, the black smoke all over the place. Why is the IDF currently targeting those oil installations?
So the idea is, again, just as mentioned, we have moved into another phase of the war. And in this phase, the infrastructure that is connected to the regime is being targeted in order to limit their ability to keep governing. And this is just one example of many targets that are being stricken in Iran by Israel and the United States. The idea is, again, we have three main objectives here. The first two, you're very well aware, are the atomic and nuclear program and the ballistic missiles program that is doing enormous damage all over the region. And the third one is the regime and the infrastructure of the regime.
And when it comes to the regime, what do you want to see after that? Democracy in place?
Well, we hope for the Iranian people to rise up and to choose their own governance and their own way to lead the country, and not being ruled by an oppressive regime that has been killing tens of thousands in the street merely in the past few weeks. So that's pretty much it.
When we listen to pretty much analysts across the board, when you compare it with President Trump saying they're looking for a Delcy Rodriguez figure, a president like in Venezuela that can take over from Nicolas Maduro after he was captured, and yet the government, the regime seems so entrenched that there isn't this figure. And within civil society, you haven't got institutions that have been able to build up to anywhere near capacity to have even comparisons that we've seen in the UK to Iraq in 2003, suggestions from former British diplomats saying the ability, even in Iraq, appeared to be, this is according to British diplomats, better than it is now for Iranians to rise up. So the risk to reward ratio here, I mean, to what extent do you acknowledge that there is a big risk and with it could come chaos, civil war?
There is a big challenge, that's for sure. The Iranians, let's be clear here, they've been killing every opposition possible in the past 47 years. So a regime change is obviously something that is challenging, it's something that is complicated, something that might take some time. We're not talking about a war that will last days, we're talking about weeks. And obviously, every country is different. We can't compare Venezuela to Iran. It's a completely different system. But before the topple of Assad in Syria, everybody said it's not going to take time, it's not going to happen, and nobody saw it coming. So I think in the Middle East, sometimes things that are unexpected happen, and I think it's too early for us to analyze the day after. Targets are still being stricken every single day. The operation is still ongoing, and I commend Noga for her reporting from Israel, stating the immense suffering that is happening today in the north of Israel. It's also worth mentioning that there are many injured people in Petah Tikva and Tel Aviv today. It's been complicated and a war on all fronts.
When we look at what's happened, you talked about 47 years of threats and violence from the Iranian regime, and analysts wouldn't doubt that President Trump used that in his 8-minute video justifying the conflict, and therefore here's the rub when it comes to justification legally. And you can talk about the oppression, the suppression of tens of thousands, perhaps even more Iranians, December and January, in the uprising that was suffocated brutally. But that is different from a justification for legal means, either through the UN, we know the two routes, through the UN Security Council, it hasn't gone through, Israel and the US, or through defending from an imminent threat. Have you seen any evidence that there is an imminent threat?
So we consider what happened in Iran an imminent threat, that's for sure. As you know, the Security Council is blocked. You have Russia and China on the other end, so it's not really a path. The UN is basically clogged in the past several years after the invasion of Ukraine. And so if we're talking about imminent threat, we know quite clearly that Iran has been pushing through to create infrastructure that will allow them in the future to advance their nuclear program and ballistic missile program untouched in very, very deep underground facilities. And once we have found evidence of this, this is for us an imminent threat, because the moment that they accomplish this kind of objective, it will be impossible for us to prevent such project in the future.
You can see the big issue, the elephant in the room, which is evidence, and you can see and hear the echoes of history. You probably, I would imagine, understand that when we were told back in 2003 about weapons of mass destruction from George Bush and Tony Blair in Iraq, nothing emerged from that. While we have critics of George Bush then, to quote his words, "Fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you." In this scenario, we are waiting to see any evidence.
Yeah, but it's a completely different situation. Let's be clear. We're seeing on the ground today massive amount of ballistic missiles targeting 12 countries. The regime...
Since the beginning of the conflict.
Since the beginning of the conflict. We're talking about...
But since US and Israeli attacks.
Yes, but can you imagine what would have happened if the US and Israel have decided not to join this, not to start this offensive, and just let Iran multiply its military capabilities, multiply its process of a nuclear bomb. They already enrich the uranium, and this is something that was stopped by us back in June 2025. So it's very clear that there is intent by the Iranian regime, and we can see it now play in action. The reaction to a threat to Iran is all-out war in the region. They're targeting civilian infrastructure everywhere, hotels, residential buildings, nothing to do with military targets. And my point here is quite simple. Can you imagine what would have happened if Israel and the United States have waited 6 months, 12 months, in order to have this completely sealed proof, 100%, here you go, here's the uranium, here's the ballistic missile, and here is the program being produced. So it's quite problematic.
The trouble is, several European leaders don't believe you. They believe, like Pedro Sanchez, I'll quote the Spanish Prime Minister, that there is no doubt this is a deeply repressive regime. That is one thing that has to be separated from the legality of war. He, perhaps so far, stands alone in Europe saying that he believes this is an illegal war. But you have Keir Starmer as well, the British Prime Minister, who now faces the wrath of President Trump because he didn't go in at the time. He's a lawyer himself, and he assessed for himself there wasn't that evidence. He used the expression himself, didn't he, that echoes of the Iraq war, we've had to calibrate this. Has that disappointed you?
I'll tell you what, Israel is quite used to fighting its wars alone. We've been doing this for ever since the creation of the state of Israel.
But you're not alone. You have the biggest backer on board with you.
Exactly. So the fact that the United States, sharing the intelligence between the two countries, arrived into the same conclusion is something that was unforeseen and is unprecedented. The fact that other countries have not reached the same conclusion is disappointing, but we try and see the positive in every part, and we see that there is a crucial part and a crucial importance to the support of the international community if they decide not to participate, and this is something that we never asked for, but in order to defend key elements in the region, and this is something that is happening. We see examples of France, of the United Kingdom, that even though they have some criticism, they see the importance and they see the risk of the regime just firing all over the place. And the second thing is that for Lebanon, the importance of the international community, bringing an end to this Hezbollah frenzy that is putting the entire northern part of Israel, southern part of Lebanon, up until Beirut, into danger in a war that is basically, Lebanon has nothing to do with this war. We have nothing against the Lebanese people, nothing against the Lebanese government. They basically have an occupying force of Iran embedded in their infrastructure, embedded in their cities, putting them in a situation where they never want to be in.
But that didn't change during there was a ceasefire in place for a long time with Hezbollah and militia backed by Iran, which you hear those within Lebanon talking about the equivalent of their pope being killed, killing the supreme leader, their messenger to God. Hence the attacks. Now there's no justification to it, but gives us a sense of the steps beyond that. I mentioned tonight at the top of the program, hearing from Reuters that the US considering special forces going into Iran. What do you make of that? Would you like to see that?
I think it's a very, very complicated decision. We don't know how it will begin. We know how it might begin. We don't know how it will end. What you're referring to is basically the enriched uranium that is very deep underground now blocked. I don't know the operational details, especially not from here in France, but. Basically, it's the decision that needs to be made by the Americans. It's just like you said in the beginning, there's pros and cons to every decision. And we'll have to wait and see if maybe an aerial bombardment will be enough, just like we did in June, in order to block the entrances to that facility. Again, we'll have to wait and see regarding the military details of that.
Hen, thanks for joining us tonight. Hen Feder, the Israeli spokesperson for the embassy here in